Welcome to the South by East podcast, where we discuss culture, the scriptures, and everything in between and how they impact Southeast Topeka with your co-hosts, Jonathan Sublett and Braille Watson. Welcome to another episode of South by East, where we discuss the scriptures, culture, and everything in between. And today I have another special guest with you, Del-Metrius Herron, who is a Topeka native and a graduate of Washburn University. And she's currently a realtor with Keller Williams, One Legacy Partners. Prior to her role as a realtor, she served 8 years as an IT specialist in the Kansas Army National Guard. And during her time of service, she completed a tour of duty in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom and Operation Spartan Shield with Alpha 2130th Field Artillery. Thank you for your service.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, but her service doesn't just stop there. Like, she didn't just stop once she took off the uniform and the fatigues. She is also a board member of the Sunflower Association of Realtors Board, a commissioner on Topeka's Planning Commission, a member of the advisory board of the Kansas Chamber's Emerging Leaders Program, and a past chair for Forge Young Talent, and a member of St. Topeka's Housing Committee. Yeah, but in the midst of all these things, and if you didn't know, we got a big dog here with us today, and so we're happy about that. But in the midst of all her service and devotion to her clients, to her country, to the various people across the state of Kansas, her favorite pastime is to be with her family. And so she is a mother to a 13-year-old son named Anthony and wife to Emmanuel Herron. So, hey, welcome, Del-Metrius, to the podcast.
Thank you. I appreciate that warm introduction.
Yes. So, I'm an avid reader, so I always like to give book tips from other people to know how to spend my Audible credits when they come through. So what's the last thing you read that had a deep impact on you, and why?
So this was so hard for me to answer because I love to read. And I'm actually reading 2 books right now.
Okay.
One of them is Finding Me by Viola Davis. It is so good. So I would say she reads it in her own voice. I like an Audible where it's a biography where the author reads it.
Yes.
So I would say definitely catch that one. And then I'm reading The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry.
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
That I've now added that to one of my books that I'm going to read every single year. Like,
that's
it's completely just shifted my perspective on just focus and being intentional. Like, why am I really doing what I'm doing?
Yeah. So there's a couple that I'm trying to get into right now. It's one called Next Sunday that I'm probably going to pick up next. I'm reading a book called After Doubt that's about a healthy way of deconstructing your faith. But I'm probably going to get into Next Sunday Next. It's written by a mom and daughter about kind of the future of gathering. But there's one that I bought on Audible that I really want to do something with the community with. And I think it's called, if I remember right, All That She Carried. And it's a story about a young lady who has this bag that was passed down throughout the generations of her family that her ancestors brought over in slavery. It was all that, this bag was their family heritage that they've passed from generation to generation. And so I want to get into that.
Oh, that sounds really good.
And so, but then not only are we fans of books, but I probably won't be able to hear my grandkids when they get old enough because we are a fan of the beats. So what album has your heart right now?
Man, so I'll be honest, I don't listen to music as much as I used to. Like, the only time I can catch a good song is when I'm meal prepping or I'm doing a long drive. But I will say I've been listening to the 90s R&B Essentials playlist on Apple, has been just on repeat.
Yeah.
And then I've been listening to a lot of UK R&B artists. I feel like, hands down, European artists got R&B market on lock right now.
Yeah.
So I would say those are the main 2, and then just trying to figure out what my son's listening to. So I'm listening to Yeet, Roddy Ricch, all this different stuff, because I want to know what he's listening to.
I don't know nothing about that.
Me neither.
But I know if you're listening to that 90s R&B, it's going to have a in there somewhere. And
every time my son gets in the car, he's like, Mom, I think I'm going to fall asleep. I'm like, You'll be okay.
You're gonna be all right.
You'll be all right.
Yeah, that's good.
It's a function.
That's good. I, you know what? Right now, I've been jamming at New Maverick City, and actually, the staff got Brill and I, because our birthdays are really close, tickets to the Kirk Franklin Maverick City concert.
Oh, that's gonna be good. I saw some of their stuff on YouTube, the one they did in the prison.
Yeah. So that's what I'm saying. I'm jamming that one, and so we just I'm jamming that a lot right now. The every summer 112 they drop a summer playlist, so I'm kind of getting into some of those kind of deals. Just steady processing that.
You know, another thing I've really been liking to listen to is the Tiny Desk concerts.
Yes.
I find that I'm listening to those more than I'm really listening.
I've been on those since they started, and and they're just always fantastic to see what people can do with trim down this instrumentation and everything.
Oh yeah, yep.
Yeah, all up in there. And then we're also just connoisseurs of food and different things of that nature, and always looking. I got 3 littles, and we're always looking for things. I'm not a Topeka native, and so what is your favorite local thing to do when you have mommy and son date time?
So it's funny enough, I've actually did this with my son probably since he was 3 or 4 years old. My mom did it with me.
Yeah.
But we would just go walk and get ice cream. So I grew up in Central Topeka.
Yeah.
So we would walk to Dairy Queen, which was a laundromat, which now is Circle Coffee.
Yeah.
But we walked there when I was a little girl. I walked there with my son. We'll still go there now. We switched it to Baskin Robbins because now he's trying to go to Cold Stone. And I'm like, okay, these ice cream trips is going up in price.
Yeah.
But we want to catch the new ice cream shop here in Southeast Topeka. Too.
Yeah, Sweet Tea.
Yep, so we're going to try that one out.
Big shout outs to the Vincents that own Circle Coffee, and also to the Vanderpools who own Sweet Tea, and also was it 9-iron or 8-iron?
Yep.
And so good stuff. Like shout out to them, local businesses. I'm all for small business.
Yep.
And then what about your favorite hidden gem eating spot in the city?
It'll be Taco Del Sol off of 6th Street. And they got a steak burrito. You're going to need a nap after you have it.
Oh, yeah.
But the thing is probably like this big, but my mom would take us there when I was a little girl. I used to be able to eat the whole thing, and I don't know how I did.
Yeah.
Because now I eat half, and I'm like, okay, well,
you know what? That changed. That's how you know your age catching up with you. A lot of stuff that you
don't metabolize like it used to.
Yeah, you can't. I can't even. There's a lot of nights where our kids out eat us at dinner, and we're like, hey,
how?
Like how? Where's it going?
It must be the freedom of no bills.
That's what I think it is.
Yeah,
that's what I.
Right?
Yeah.
Your metabolism work a little different.
You're walking around free. Yeah. And so, I mean, that's one of those deals that's good. And what I'm noticing is this. As we ask this question to our guests about eating, like 6th Street is winning.
Oh, yeah.
It is winning. East Topeka is winning.
Yeah. When you go by the building and it hasn't changed in like 40 years, the food got to be fire.
Come on, man. Come on.
Like, they know how to focus. They ain't going to repaint the walls, but your food going to be good.
It's going to be good, right? You get that bag from Prize Packaging, and you rub it on a piece of paper, and that joke will become clear. You can see through it, and you know it's right. Litmus test.
And just don't plan nothing after.
Yeah.
No intense activity.
But, and this may sound strange coming from me because, people ask me all the time, like, Jonathan, how did you go from being a chemical engineer? I was at the end of my chemical engineering career, I was a project manager, but I started out in process automation. I was writing control code to control chemical plants, and then like they were like, "Man, you're a church planner, founder of a nonprofit, whatever." How did that switch happen? But then I look at you and I say, "Well, you were in the military in IT." How did you go from military IT to realtor? Like, how does that happen?
You know, what's funny about that is all of my career choices have been out of a dire need to pivot. Like, before pivot was even a word. Even how I got in the military is one of them, like, okay, I'm not getting paid child support. I got to make up the difference. all right, I'm gonna join the military. Like, and so
Wow.
it was the same thing with, I was IT specialist. I thought I was gonna go into cybersecurity. I actually so when I got back from my deployment, I was supposed to move to Washington, D.C. I got a job offer at the Pentagon, and I just knew I was gonna be sweet sailing into cybersecurity, work from home, just enough for me and my son to live a great life, and just God had other plans. So I got licensed in 2016, and I was like, nobody's gonna buy a house for me. Let me stay where I have security and stability and what makes sense. Then I got the opportunity to deploy, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna take this opportunity. And then I got back, but Anthony got really, really sick to the point he wasn't even able to be at school full day. I would drop him off, and they would call me by noon. Hey, you got to come pick him up. Yeah. And this happened day after day after day. At the time, I was working at a database center in Kansas City, the Marine Corps Database Center. Yeah. It's called McKeats. So all the enterprises in Kansas City, and that's where I was working, kind of getting in server and data support. And I just kind of was like, I can't do this. So I was just praying about it. And I feel like the Lord was leading me to quit my job. And I'm like, that ain't God. That's so irresponsible. Yeah. Like, God would not tell somebody to quit their job. This can't be God. So I continued to work. And then it got just so much, and then I just prayed about it and was like, Lord, I feel like this is where you're leading me. I don't know. And then there was just some other signs he had given me. I was at work. When you're in IT, you can be on, you're on the internet. So I'm just looking, this news article comes up about an NFL Giants player who quit his job, quit at halftime because he said God told him to quit playing football. Yeah. And I was like, that's just too ironic. But then it just got so intense, my situation, that I just took a leap of faith. I had some savings from my deployment. Yeah. And just went in. I got my first sale within a month. I did have to go back and start working full time. Yeah. And did real estate part time for a year. But during that time period, I really was like, no, this is where I want to be. Yeah. And then I made the final leap in 2019.
Man, that's so key. Mm-hmm. 'Cause my story is similar in some ways where I was full-time chemical engineer making six figures, and God was just steady pulling me more and more. I was part-time ministry, and I knew I wasn't supposed to be long-term engineer, but I kept trying to find a way to stay in because there was some other factors, right? I was just and I remember hearing about when Cortez landed on the shores of North America, and he made his soldiers burn the ships. And he said, either we're going to go take it. Now, I'm going to tell you something. That was trash what he did to the Native Americans here. But he said, either we're gonna make it or we're going to die. And I just think there's so many people who never realize who they're supposed to be in their purpose for being here because they never had a ship burning moment. Yeah. They always have a backup plan or escape, and I look at your story, I look at mine, like, man, when I went and raised missionary support and I told my job I was finished, I stayed part-time for a little bit and then I got to go. And people, like all my family, everybody thought, dude, you're absolutely crazy.
I did not tell my mom for 3 months. Yeah. I had to make the decision without telling anybody just because I will say this. I think some people are able to function in life without peace. I'm just not one of those people.
Shalom.
Like when I'm starting to feel like I used to have debilitating anxiety, but when I felt the peace of God, I finally knew what peace was. And so anything outside of that, I'm just like...
So here's the deal, and that's so interesting that you say that because people will follow God because they want a situation to get. They want like more money, they want a better house, they want their spouse to act right or whatever else. But what God truly promises that we'll get in the eschaton is peace. Through Jesus Christ, we'll get peace with God, and then eventually, when the removal of sin happens, we'll get peace with all the rest of creation. And I think there's something in us that's broken when we can be okay with brokenness and a lack of peace in our lives. Yeah. It's showing like something deeper going on. And so, that's just good stuff. But now you're telling your story. You were a young single mom. You were you were like, hey, I got to make this work, or this ain't gonna work. And your son was sick. You making all these transitions. Now, what came first? Was it buying a house or selling one? And if selling came first, did it feel strange to you to sell a house when you had never owned one?
Man, so I did not grow up in a house well, my mom did own a house at one point. I was in high school, and she had gotten married. Her husband at the time moved in, and he was a great man. I was a horrible stepdaughter, and Father, I still repent for how I acted. But he was a great man, but he was a diabetic, and his cancer came out of remission.
Oh, man.
It actually was one of the reasons that led to the divorce. But throughout the process, our house got foreclosed on. So we probably lived in this house maybe 2 or 3 years. So I've always rented and kind of lived in an unstable housing situation.
Yeah.
And then to now go and sell real estate, I probably did close to 50 or 60 transactions before I ever owned a home.
Wow.
And when I say it was very, very odd. My first transaction, like I had to learn what is in a mortgage. You know, they're asking me questions about interest rate. I'm like, I don't even really know how that works. I mean, I know how it works with a credit card, but I didn't know the average interest rate. My first few, I would say I've learned a lot, but everything I've learned, I had to learn over the past 3 to 4 years. So yeah, I mean, even with, Manny and I and what we've been able to do, a lot of that has happened within the past year.
Yeah.
So most of my experience has been without ever owning my own property. And so when you look at the National Association of Realtor statistics, the average realtor owns a home, about 80% of them. So to try to navigate something, it's like trying to sell cars, but you don't drive. Like you ride a bike to work. Well, if someone's saying like, well, how does a windshield wiper work? Well, I got to figure out what a windshield wiper is to be able to tell you,
Since I'm over here getting emotional, because my mind goes back to our ancestors who came over as slaves, who didn't get to raise their own kids, but they raised the kids of their owners. Man, that's a part of our history, being in positions where we have to function in ways that we haven't been able to function in for ourselves, but helping somebody else to function in those spaces.
Yeah.
And so, as you were saying that, I just realized like some of the legacy, especially of our African American sisters, of continuously, and it's not solo, it's not just African Americans, but just like when I think about that and just what you're sharing in your story of being in those places throughout history, like how you're a part of a great lineage. And just and how I hope that some other young lady sees or hears this podcast and realize, some other young man, and realize that they may be getting called to a place they've never been before. And they might have to help lead some other people to that same place, having never been there themselves before, but trusting God and saying, I'm going to walk in this direction. I don't have certainty. I don't have detail. I got a direction that I'm going.
Well, and then to double that, I was also appointed into places of leadership during this time period too. So it's like, not only am I not a homeowner, but I'm now involved in having heavy conversations, even with some of the, work with Sin about how do we provide equity in housing. It's like, well, I don't own my own property yet. And so I do hope someone that hears this conversation you don't have to be the person at the end of the road to start taking those steps.
Sis, I wrote my first grant with Sin. And you and I, we've been around the table talking to bankers, and you know how we've been treated in the room.
Yeah.
And
some of those conversations, I'm like, I'm going to go read up on this.
Conversation. So when we come in, you know how we come in, we're we come in prepared. We prepare to a different level, and we know that we have to. And a lot of times we're pulling off things that we've never done. And out of my family, I'm the first homeowner.
Yeah, me too.
And so we're often almost every day having to do something that we've never done. Like you and I right now, we're working on a $110 million project. That's larger than anything I led when I was a chemical engineer. We're another $2 million project at the same time, and there's different things that we're making working on, and then moving at the speed that we're moving on things. What and let's see if we can get this in before the commercial break. You're talking about that, and you're talking about your movement. What was the biggest barrier to overcome getting into the real estate industry?
So I'm gonna give my personal one. I feel like, so let me start with my personal. My personal one, when I got licensed in 2016, was I thought that no one would buy a house from me because, quite frankly, I'm Black. I mean, in Topeka, there is diversity, but I don't get to. I didn't get to see a lot of diversity.
Okay.
So I think just not having, which after I became a realtor, I've heard of like, just some other minority realtors that were actually very, very successful in the city, but I had never seen them, and they had either quit or passed away before I started. So I think for me, it was just that barrier of, well, I know no one around me can afford to purchase a home. So who's going to buy from me? And is someone going to buy from someone that looks like me?
Yeah.
And that was a major hurdle as to why I got licensed in 2016, but I didn't start selling until I had to in 2018.
We're going to revisit that after the commercial break. Okay. We're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to come back with some more of South by East.
Are you interested in podcasting, audio, or visual media, and just don't know how to get started or take your content to the next level? Then Studio 104 was built just for you. A fully functioning audio-visual podcast studio, industry-level equipment at an affordable price to help you make that album you always wanted, start that podcast, or even share the story of how your business is impacting the community. Book your session along with a free consultation today at www.fellowshiphighcrest.com/studio104.
Welcome back to the South by East podcast, where we have our special guest, Del-Metrius Herron, on, talking about real estate and culture in Topeka and all the things in between. So let's get back into where we were at. Del, do you believe, like you were talking about some of the barriers to you getting in, do you believe that there are unnecessary barriers to minorities? Whether, when I say minorities, I don't mean just ethnic minorities, but gender minorities, socioeconomic, breaking into the real estate industry. And if so, what are they, and how can we be a part of dismantling them? Because I do feel like that's a part of our work. Every generation has the responsibility for the generation behind it. So if there are unnecessary barriers, what are they, and how can we be a part of dismantling?
So I will say this. I knew I wanted to do some sort of entrepreneurship. I didn't necessarily put it on being a realtor. I will say, if you're wanting to get into entrepreneurship, being a realtor has one of the lowest barriers of entry. 2016, I used my tax return to pay all of my fees my dues. So at the time, like, I was National Guard, just do my drill weekends, but I was still trying to make ends meet. So I used my tax return to do everything I needed to do.
You didn't put no 20s on the car?
No.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
I didn't go rack up on layaway. You know what I mean?
Didn't go on vacation.
Didn't go on vacation with it. Didn't go on no shopping spree. I used all of my tax return to get licensed.
Okay.
And then, so I will say that there's some benefits to becoming a realtor, but you're also dealing with people's biggest assets. So I think there are some barriers in education. When you're getting licensed, they're not teaching you real estate sales, and they're not teaching you real estate economics. They're just teaching you almost like real estate law for ethics.
Yeah, you just said something right there, though, that hit me. Because you do have to study to do what you do. And I know how much you research. But, like, as a pastor, like, what I see sometimes is because people follow a couple of folks on social media, or they listen to a couple of people on YouTube, they feel like they can just do what I do.
Yeah.
Like, they don't recognize the amount of prep that goes into what I do each week. And one of the things I look out there sometimes on same space, social media and different things, like, everybody thinks they can sell a house.
I'll say this. I've had clients say, you know what? You love looking at houses? I was like, I'll be honest with you, it's not my favorite part of the job, but they don't realize I do so much more than open the door and walk in a house.
Yeah.
So when I'm doing a buyer's consultation, I give people my resume, one, because I want to set the tone for professionalism.
Yeah.
But, like, I want them to understand, like, hey, I put a lot of work. Like, some of the boards that I sit on is because I wanted to learn. I got on the planning commission, not because I was an expert, it's because I want to understand the city's growth and what it's projected to be. So it's more, hey, I can serve, but I can also gain knowledge to be a help to my clients from that.
Hey.
But I will say that I think a lot of people don't realize that what you're seeing, that was it, the iceberg, the top 10%.
Yeah.
Like there's so many nights I had to stay up trying to read and figure out how to read a contract and an attorney written when I don't have a law degree, so I can communicate to my client like, hey, this is what it says.
Hey, you know what? I like to tell people sometimes that TikTok and Facebook Reels will get you a new fit, an orange jumpsuit. They teach you just enough to get you sued. And one, I believe, like, that's why I said unnecessary barriers, because I feel like there needs to be some barriers. We talk about this in policing our neighborhoods.
Yeah.
How there needs to be a greater amount of training and education that goes into becoming a peace officer. And I think that's important. And so when you're talking about some of these things, especially when you're dealing with somebody's biggest asset, the thing that closes the wealth gap in our country, that has a stake in something and passing on lineage, to have some more education and not just think because you watched a couple of TikTok videos or Facebook Reels or YouTube videos that you're that. And that's what that's one of the things that I think that separates some. They say, how do you know the difference between a runner and somebody who just is out to train for a race? You know what they say? They say if you're out here just trying to train for a race, you listen to music. But runners don't need any music or anything because it actually distracts and takes away from them if you're just a pure runner. And I think what keeps some people think it's a business when really it's just kind of a hobby, is that they're not willing to put in the education it's going to take to actually really grow that and set the real foundation.
Fact.
And they don't understand the amount of prep and work it takes to be excellent at what you do. And part of that, I think, is because there's a lack of excellence in so many areas of our life, and people just operate in mediocrity, and so they just think like, I can get out here and I know like if I bake some chocolate chip cookies and put them on the stove, then that'll help you sell your house.
But that also goes when you look at data. The average realtor doesn't make it past 3 to 5 years. There's a significant drop. I actually have some stats I had looked up because I will say this. I do believe that there are barriers, and I'm still trying to figure out what they are, because when you look at the data, African Americans were not able to be part of the National Association of Realtors until 1961. Before, they were part of the National Association of Brokers, and that was initiated in 1941. And then when you look at the data, 77% of year one realtors are going to be Caucasian, 11% Hispanic, 8% African American. It increases until year 3 and 5 to, I believe it's like, I forgot what it was, 10% 14% Hispanic, 10% African American, and then it drops off significantly for both races. So a real estate professional that's a minority that has 6 years, at least 6 years or more, significantly decreases. But when you look at the Caucasian community, it goes from 77% to 80% after year 6.
Can I tell you? Oh, I got a theory. So in ministry, seminaries were traditionally designed to where a middle class guy would be totally sponsored by his church, and the church would pay for him to go off and go to seminary undisturbed for 4 years or whatever. Just study the scriptures, learning how to do ministry, and not have to work. And him and his wife, and they would support him. And then he would graduate seminary and go to a job. Now, minorities, one, they didn't have entry into most seminaries. And then two, didn't have the financial backing to be able to go and just totally be in seminary and not have to work. So those became barriers to get in. Most church planting organizations will only give you 3 years of support in planting church. So if you don't move to an area that's a bustling suburb or something like that, Like if you come to do inner city ministry, then you don't even have the financial base for your church to be self-sustaining in 3 years. And so a lot of times you're going to be bivocational. So now what you're getting into is a lot of those guys maybe had a little bit of support. Now they're having to start working and juggling too, the family suffering. And then what eventually makes the push? They say, I can't do this anymore. I got to walk away from where I feel called to go just handle bills and business. And so you see that drop off happen where someone that maybe is in the more majority culture has the backing to say what you said earlier. Hey, I did this many transactions, or I was doing this, and I had to go back and work. Where they have some family support that can say, well, just live with us for your first year of real estate. We'll take care of bills, and you build up a nest egg. You go out here and do your thing, and you get that. Now they can move. They can make these moves, and they can be steady putting money back into their business. Where a lot of us are just saying, like, man, I need every dime, I need every scrap to just try to make ends meet. Like, I'm trying not to be homeless while I'm selling somebody else their dream home. And I think that plays into many roles.
I think that's probably a major piece to it. I feel like the entry into becoming a realtor is pretty, I would say, fair. Yeah. I think it was pretty fair. If you have the finances to pay for the test, and I know some people say in a sense that's not equity, but I do feel like there's something to having skin in the game.
I do.
And you're not wasting people's time by, if you make it $50, then you're going to have everybody trying to take this test that they're not putting in the preparation, that if they had to pay $500 or $1,000 for this test, they're going to prepare for it in a different way. But there are barriers within the industry when it comes to, I think, having that hedge of success. Yeah. I think some of it's unspoken. Like there's little unspoken norms, how to govern in a space, which I think isn't unique to the real estate industry.
That's every space in life.
So I think those are those unspoken barriers. Like one of the things is if you are a realtor, and this is just from what I know, and I could be incorrect in this. Let's say you feel like you're being discriminated against. Well, everybody is basically their independent business. So who do you report that to? Yeah. How do you advocate? How do you, at the end of the day, you're a business. You're an independent business owner. Your broker is just there to make sure you meet compliance. But if you're unhappy with that broker and something happens, that broker can just say, well, you got to leave. Yeah. And then you have to find another place. I know of a young woman in Manhattan who's dealing with this, actually. She's like, I don't even know what to do. She's like, but she can't be a broker because you have to have so many transactions before you can have a broker's license and be on your own. So there are issues in equity, but you have to get so many transactions.
I think that's where we go back to that previous question of how we dismantle it. I am truly a believer in there's times to sit at the table, and then there's times when you need to be catching me in the parking lot of the local home supply store because I'm going to be building the table. And I think sometimes we have to look at some things like Braille, who's one of the co-hosts. He's in the music industry, and he knows that he sat at some tables for different record companies and realized that the solution wasn't going to come by him getting a different position at the table, that he was going to have to build a table in the record industry. And I think that's the case in so many, also in the church and nonprofit world. So I think, Del, that I would consider you, and I think a lot of people in our community would consider you the top realtor in Southeast Topeka when it comes to knowing our market. Right now, the housing market is crazy. What is it looking like to you right now, and what are your predictions over this next year when they say recession is coming? We're still dealing with, in June, in July, no, in June we had another 9% inflation. The numbers hit, and we just seeing gas prices go everywhere. What's your prediction for the housing market in Southeast Topeka?
So I would say I'll give the statistics for all of Topeka because I think it's just going to apply to Southeast Topeka. And then I'll kind of hone in on what I think these numbers mean for Southeast Topeka specifically. When you look at Topeka as a whole, our average home price was about $180,000. It just dropped to $175,000. You are seeing some homes stay on the market a little longer. and you're seeing price drops. Now, if you were to read some articles on the coast in Georgia, they're saying there's significant slowing down.
Yeah.
Real estate is very local. I think it's keep an eye on those things, but don't make that your decision maker.
Okay.
Where I'm seeing price drops are really properties over $250,000.
Okay.
I was just doing some data for a client of mine because I wanted them to understand the market they're buying in.
Yeah.
So if you're trying to buy a house between $100,000 and I'll say $100,000 to $175,000, you know, the listed sale price is 103.5%. That means if you list a house for $100,000, most likely you're going to sell it for $103,000.
Okay.
And for the city of Topeka, it's 100%. You list for $100,000, you're going to sell for $100,000.
Okay.
If you look at Southeast Topeka, a lot of the properties are within that $100,000 to $175,000 range.
Yes.
So it's still a very competitive market all over Topeka.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest, I don't see property values in Topeka going down. State average is $250,000. We're at $170,000, and people keep moving down here from out of state, and they see our prices, and they're like, I just spoke with another client coming up from Georgia. They're getting out the military. They're coming to Topeka because of cost of living.
When I moved here, the housing was a lot lower, considerably lower than it was in Texas. So right now, what's your favorite? What bit of advice then, given the crazy house prices and different things of that nature, what bit of advice would you give to a first-time home buyer right now?
So what I'm telling my buyers is to be patient and to prepare. So if you know that you want to, the thing is it's still a good market to buy a house. You know, 5 and 6% interest rate sounds high, but the market average is like 8 to 10%. As long as it's below 8 to 10%, it's still a great time to buy. Keep in mind, people buy houses when the interest rate was 12 to 14%.
Lynn Rogers, the state treasurer, when he was on the podcast, said he bought his first house when it was like 15 to 16%.
Yeah. People buy in every market. I think my generation I can speak to, I think we got a little spoiled because we've just seen money be so cheap. You know, like 3% interest went to 5%. What? It's like, you know, my grandma's like, you should be grateful.
Yeah.
You know? So with that being said, preparation looks like going to get pre-approved. Another part of preparation is putting some money in your savings and then like getting your team together. Get with a realtor, get with a lender, and do all of that before you want somebody to show you a house. Because I can guarantee you, if you're like, well, I just want to see this house now, oh, we could see it, but by the time you go get pre-approved, that house is going to be on the market and you have now fallen in love with the home that is no longer there.
But not only that, I feel like if you are asking a realtor to show you houses, before you have done that work, then you're also costing their family. You're taking food out of that realtor's family's mouths because their time is valuable, and they could be working with a client who is ready to buy. And I just think.
But that is a level of consideration not all people have. And I think people don't understand that. Like when you were talking with a realtor who this is all they do, like every time they step into a house, they're weighing, okay. Weighing how can I help this person out the best, but also thinking about the fact that you're not even ready. Realtors, they want you to make a great decision. I can tell you the last thing I want is for someone to fall in love with a house they cannot buy. Because what's going to happen is you're going to compare every house we see next to that one, and then you're not ever going to be happy with anything you find. You're going to feel like you settled, but it's just because they weren't ready.
So that's an important point that you just said, and I think it leads to my next question.
Well, I want to explain patience just real quick.
Okay.
Depending upon your financial situation, you might be told no 2 to 3 times before you get the yes. And so where you should be able to get out there, we're going to start looking for about 3 weeks to a month, and we're going to make an offer. It's like, hey, we may make an offer, make another offer, because it's very competitive. And so just don't get discouraged in the process. If you had this, if you didn't get an offer because the other person got no inspections, and you don't even know where the water shutoff is in the house, it wasn't the house for you. So
all that leads, I'm serious, that leads to, when it came to dating girls, man, all they could tell me was no. I was going to ask, right? But when it came to the thought of buying a house, I was debt free. I had money in the bank, and I rented for longer than I should have, because in the way that you thought no one would want to buy a house from you, I thought that no one would want to sell a house to a little fat boy from South Oak Cliff. And the fear of rejection kept me renting for longer than I had to. What would you tell Renter John to help me make the move from being a renter to being a homeowner? And then how does someone in our South by East audience, how can they tell if they're ready to move from renting to buying?
Okay. So I will say this. When it comes to somewhere, if I were to be talking to Renter John, I would probably ask him a few more questions about what does a home really mean to him, and why does he feel that someone's going to tell him no. And the reason why I would dig into that a little bit more is that if it's a mere fact because, hey, the fact that I know that discrimination exists, and I feel like, hey, this isn't going to happen for me, or if it's just a matter of, hey, what if I'm still not qualified? I think it would really just depend on the situation with that. Can you give some context?
So part of it was having a house meant security. I used to, like growing up, man, we fought a lot in the neighborhood, and then sometimes you be fighting down the street and somebody run into their yard, then you know the fight was kind of over because you don't go fight somebody in their own yard, right? Like that's just crazy.
Yeah.
And I always wanted a yard to retreat to. Well, we grew up in apartments a lot or rental houses, and I never had that. And so sometimes, like I remember my first trip to Africa where I boo-hoo cried because I never thought I would ever get to see Africa. I thought Africa was something that I would forever read about and see on TV and see in magazines, but I would never connect to the place where my people are from. And I boo-hoo cried. I mean, I just bawled, and people couldn't figure out why I was bawling so hard. And because in my mind, I didn't even think I deserved to connect with a place of my heritage, because most of what I knew like was just the civil rights movement. And hearing and learning history in school and knowing the struggle of our people on these shores and the disconnectedness. And so like owning a house was on a whole nother level of connection, and owning, like having a piece of a country where I felt like I just existed in but I wasn't necessarily a part of.
Well, so I think this is how I would address it, because one of the things that I have learned is that as a realtor, I've become a therapist, not licensed, but I find that when you're helping people buy a home, I've had some of the most intimate conversations of what people are dealing with, and rejection being one of them. And so how I would address that is that I can completely understand trying to walk into something you've never had before, because one, I could connect with you in that space, but I would speak to that place of rejection and say, you know what, it doesn't hurt to find out.
Yeah.
You don't even have to go in looking for a yes or no, but here are the questions, which is kind of, one of my favorite resources is I connect my clients with questions to ask.
Yeah.
I would tell you, hey, here's the information. These are the steps, 1, 2, 3. And these are the questions to ask the lender. These are the questions to ask your insurance agent. Here are the questions to ask them. Because what it does is it empowers and dignifies you to say, I now can walk into these spaces and determine whether I want to work with this lender. You know? Because at the end of the day, there's standard like credit rates. There's really standard things. But when you kind of have a fear of like rejection or a fear of whether I belong, buying a home is completely different. So I could easily say, oh, you'll be okay. You're debt free, blah, blah, blah. But I would really want to say, well, here, let me give you the questions, and here are the steps to go through that.
Yeah, and I'm going to tell you, like the realtor, it was somebody that had helped some people in my church about it, and they recommended, so I trusted them, and so I trusted the realtor. She helped me, and the biggest thing was I was like, my mom almost passed when I was in high school. I think it was like the spring of my junior year. And I prayed, I said, God, just let my mom get to see me walk. She needs to see one of her kids walk. And then I was like, man, I made it to college and she's still living. God, just let my mom see one of her kids graduate. And then as I house shopped, the biggest thing on my mind was I want a house that my mom would be proud of, because she always talked about a brick home. So I was like, it's gonna be brick.
Yeah.
Because she always talked about, man, she dreamed of having a brick home. And so as I looked, like, I wouldn't buy anything at that time. I wouldn't even look at anything that was like multi-level, because her bad knees and stuff. And so it had to be something that she can enjoy all of it. And that realtor probably got tired of me saying, my mom can't enjoy the whole house, I ain't buying it. And like, I'm serious. And that was just a part of the process. And I was just like, I want my mom to be proud of me and to come and look at it and be proud of me. And so that was such a big part of that whole buying situation.
But understanding that buying a home meant something completely different. Like, your why to buy a home wasn't just like, I just need some more space. Like, you know what I mean? So I have learned working with clients, like, really understanding what is that motivation and what does really home mean. It has helped me just be a better agent to people and really meet those needs.
That's so good. That's so good. Because even my first apartment out of college, I got a spare room partially so that my mom could come visit me. Like, I'm seriously, I had a 2-bedroom, so I mean, that was a big deal for me. And I know I sound like a mama's boy now.
It's okay.
But that's okay. What we're gonna do is we're gonna take one more quick break. And then we're going to come back, and I got some quick hitters that we're just going to kind of rail off some resources at our interaction for you. So we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back.
Are you interested in podcasting, audio, or visual media, and just don't know how to get started or take your content to the next level? Then Studio 104 was built just for you. A fully functioning audio-visual podcast studio, industry-level equipment at an affordable price to help you make that album you always wanted, start that podcast, or even share the story of how your business is impacting the community. Book your session along with a free consultation today at www.fellowshiphighcrest.com/studio104.
Welcome back to the South by East podcast. As we get ready to round things up for today, we got some quick hitters that we want to ask to get some resources in your hands, in your email browsers, to get it in your Chrome. So, Del.
Yes.
We have a lot of banks in town that you can choose from with getting a mortgage, different things of that nature. What are some of the lending programs available, like in the pluses, minuses? Like, just, I know we don't have time to go through all of them, but some of the top, like, lending programs.
Okay, so what I'll do is I'll kind of speak to some of the lending programs, and I'll get the information to you all for them. But CapFed has a Home at Last program.
Yes.
That's low down payment, low closing costs. Core First has a 1% down payment program. Both Invista and Community Bank, they have down payment assistance programs through Federal Home Loan Bank. And then Bank of Midwest has a down payment assistance program that's 5% of the purchase price of the home. These funds don't run out. And so those are a lot of the resources that I think are great for buyers. But one thing to know when you're going to a bank about down payment resources or closing cost resources, that sometimes your interest rate's going to go up, which I don't think is always a bad thing. But I also know that I am not as adverse to debt. I see debt as a leverage. So if you have to pay a little bit higher interest rate to get in a home, I'm comfortable with that. But some people, that might be a big difference, $50 to $100 on your mortgage. And so you have to be comfortable with that monthly payment. So when you get down payment assistance, talk with the lenders and ask them, how is this going to affect my interest rate? And just kind of weighing the pros and cons on whether that program is the best for you, because not all of them are the same.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. You know, when I got my first car, my sophomore year of college, I wanted a car so bad, but then I realized that just because I could afford the car note, that sometimes I was paying a car note and walking because I had no money to repair it. What do I need to plan for beyond just the mortgage amount if I'm going to get into a home?
So some of this goes into the mortgage with closing, because people think you're just saving for down payment, but you have closing costs, and your closing costs are your prepaids. There's inspections. Those prepaids are going to be about 6 months to a year of your insurance. They're going to set aside about 6 months of your taxes. And it's not just bringing 3.5%. You're actually going to need about 7%, even with down payment assistance. Some other things too is I always tell people bare minimum. When I say bare minimum, I really would rather you not even have this, but at least have the deductible for your home insurance and savings.
Yeah.
And that's bare minimum.
But,
at least have your deductible for your home insurance.
But if you don't have that, are you truly ready?
No.
Okay.
And this is my personal opinion, I'm not a lender, but I feel like just because you have money to bring to a transaction, if all you had saved was $15,000, I think you should still go for down payment assistance, because now you're using your entire savings to get in this house. And you know what? That HVAC system that's 1 year old can still go out 6 months in. And so I just feel like, hey, if the money's there and you qualify for it, take it.
Yeah. Don't do that to yourself. Mm-hmm. Don't wipe out your emergency fund.
And sometimes you don't have to put 20%. You can still get a conventional loan and put down 15. You can put down 12, 13. Just talk with your lender. But I always like to have just a little bit of reserve in the bank.
Yeah, yeah. And so, and you kind of mentioned this earlier, kind of alluded to it, but I just want to how much time does it normally take to go from contacting an agent to moving into my first home?
So it just depends. On average, from the time you write the contract to the time you get the keys, it's about 30 to 45 days.
Yeah.
In this market, it's I'm telling clients, hey, if you got to be out of your lease next month, you might be a little stretch. I've actually had some buyers decide to say, hey, I'm just going to wait and renew my lease because I don't know when I'm going to get an accepted offer.
Yeah.
But typically, from the day you get your offer accepted to closing is about 30, 45 days. But what I tell clients, for instance, I spoke with a young woman today. Her lease is up July 31st of next year. Well, I told her, hey, it's about 30, 45 days to close. So we'll need to have an offer written for you to meet that deadline, either mid-April or late May.
That's good. That's good to get that kind of timeline. I like stuff like that because it helped me be prepared.
But that's just for the offer. So when you start looking, I would suggest start looking 3 months before then. So really January, February, you need to be getting pre-approved so you can start looking and be prepared. Don't wait till April 1st if you need to be in there by July 31st.
That's good.
Not in this market.
That's good because you're going to have to renew that lease. So
or you're going to be sweating the whole time.
That's not good.
And then you're going to start making compromises you really wouldn't want to make. I don't like someone making compromises like that.
Yeah. Because now you're gonna get into something that you're not gonna be happy with later.
They're like, no, I don't need inspections. I'm like, do you know what a hot water heater is? Are you sure?
Yes.
Yeah, no, I'm not comfortable writing that offer up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So with that, beyond starting maybe 6 months early in the process, what are some other things that I can do to prepare for the buying process that help me avoid potential frustrations later in the process?
So I would say that the number one thing you can probably do is really get a great real estate agent. And this is why I remember when I was pregnant with my son and my midwife was like, do not Google anything else. Stop. Don't come to me about a parasite you heard of in South America. Don't stop. I don't want you to read. She told me don't read another book on pregnancy. Don't go on WebMD. She's like, if you have a headache, take a Tylenol. Stop Googling stuff.
Yeah.
I know I was so bad. But now, sometimes with clients, your local real estate professional is probably really going to be the most knowledgeable person.
Yeah.
It's great to read things on the real estate market, but real estate is so hyper-local that I don't think people realize what's going on in Topeka is completely different than Lawrence and completely different than, Manhattan. Like, literally three different worlds when it comes to real estate. Lenders operate different in Lawrence, even in Manhattan. And sometimes people don't realize just those little specific things. So outside from savings, at least knowing your credit score. Yeah. If you don't know your credit score, you might want to reconsider whether you're ready to buy a home, because typically, and not all cases, but sometimes when you don't know, to me that shows that you haven't been doing maintenance on it. So you either don't have credit or your credit's not in the best situation. Sometimes people are surprised. They're like, oh, I got a 760. I don't even know how. Yeah.
One of the things I look at too, Del, is I go out and look at people's social media. So, there's pretty much no job that you can interview or apply for now that won't go check your social media when you get ready to hire on for them. And for me, when I get ready to do business with a company, I go and check their social media. So because of where my heart is when it comes to community development and stuff, if I have seen them talking down my side of town, I will not do business with a bank or a realtor or a broker that doesn't feel that doesn't inspire dignity and reaffirm the dignity of my community. I'm going to give that opportunity and money to someone else because one day I might be selling this house.
Right.
And if they feel that way now, then they're going to downplay what I feel my house is worth. My biggest asset is worth when it comes time to handle that. And why do I want someone who doesn't look at me with value and dignity and worth? Why do I want to put my biggest asset in their hands?
Well, and then, and I've learned this just from life experience. One of the best things you can learn to do is learn to ask great questions.
Yeah.
So you can go and Google, what are some questions I need to ask my realtor to know they're the right one? Because you really need to work with someone that you trust. And this is actually a boundary I put in my business, is that I'm going to start referring people that don't trust me to other people. One, it's a painful process for them and a painful process for me. If you don't trust my recommendations, then that's okay. I'm just not the person you need to be working with.
And not only that, like, I waited several years after moving to Topeka before I put my money in a bank in a Topeka, because I wanted to see which banks were going to invest in my community. Those banks and financial institutions are making money off of my money. And so if I'm going to get a mortgage through them, if I'm going to get any of that, I want to make sure that they're willing to invest in my community. And if they're not, then that's just kind of one of those things I look at is how are you reinvesting in the place where I live at? So what are some unavoidable frustrations, though, in the home buying process and also the home selling process?
All right, I'll start with the home selling on this one. People going to be in your house. They're going to leave your lights on. They're going to put fingerprints on your mirror. They're going to use your toilet and not flush.
Oh, come on now.
You're going to put the booties on the outside for them to put their shoes on, put over their shoes because you just vacuumed, and you're going to see,
Are you trying to get us high today?
I'm sorry. I'm just saying that I think it's one of them unspoken things. And so I remember one of my first few listings, I didn't know this because I've never lived in a house. I don't know what it's like I didn't know what it was like to sell a house. And hot. They left all these lights on. I thought you was going to come turn the lights off. I was like, oh, no ma'am. It's a showing. I'm not there. So they're they're in there with a real estate professional, but that other agent only has so much control over a whole adult human being. Even in COVID, there was a lot of regulations about how many people you can have in a house. But you'd be surprised when people are like, I'm not doing that. Everybody come in the house. Well, the person that lives in this house has requested that not to happen.
Yeah, I understand, though. Every father knows the pain of continually walking around turning off lights. All of us know that pain.
Yeah.
But another man's throne, you're going to take that to McDonald's. You're going to have to go down the street to the gas station. You cannot be like
Some people don't close the cabinets after they open them. You know what I mean? So you could come in, lights on, every cabinet open. I'm not saying this happens all the time, but it's one of those things. As a seller, you should probably be prepared for that. Strangers will be in your house, and they're going to do things that annoy you. And you're going to have to get up out your house for someone to walk through. Another thing, too, is if you have a ring and you hear them leaving, you might hear them criticizing your house and saying negative things about your decor. That picture that you love of your grandkid, they'll be like, that baby look cockeyed. You will hear things if you were listening to the buyers on your ring. So just don't spy. Just wait to hear. Just wait to get the feedback. Don't listen in on the security equipment. Save yourself and everybody else.
I have a T-shirt that says "Saved but got hands." And so you. But
those are the things I feel like if you're going to sell a house. There's a bunch of other things, but those are it's going to try your nerves.
One of the things that the pandemic sparked was kind of just people who would never think about doing home improvement projects started doing home improvement projects.
Yes.
But there's some wise improvements you can make, and then there's some things you can do that you're never going to get that money back. When you're advising someone getting ready to sell, what are the top improvements you tell them that they can make to their home that they'll actually get a return on value from?
It depends on the seller. I would say you'll be surprised how far a fresh paint and flooring will go.
Okay.
Honestly, I am really, when a person's like, oh, I'm going to redo the whole kitchen, I'm like, hold on. I would say before you go redo a whole kitchen or whole bathroom, look at the condition of the sewer. If it needs to be replaced, replace it. Look at the HVAC and AC units. If it needs to be replaced, replace that. If there's an insurance claim that you can, make on your roof, if your roof do those things, because your roof, I call them, like the heartbeat of the house, the mechanic systems. Yep. People will buy an ugly house that has those
good
systems, good bones in them.
MEP.
And so I feel like I had a client that is really determined to remodel their whole bathroom, but I'm like, we're going to take the bathtub out and put a shower, but you don't know if a family's going to want this home.
Yeah.
And so that's what I would say. Fresh paint and carpet if you're like, hey, I just need to list it. But if you're really like, I think I need to remodel something, just look at updating your mechanic system, because people will buy stability and security.
By the way, MEP stands for mechanical, electrical, plumbing. So just those base systems, the guts, the bones, the structure. And, like we had our house painted. We put money into our house before we moved in. And I moved up early because we couldn't bring our kids yet. And I know that I'm waiting till they get a certain age, because they've broken many blinds. They've done dings here and there. I'm going to repaint, but I'm waiting till they get to a certain age because
we
them
already
little
got
jokers.
A window pane in our side porch that got broken. I'm like, we just got home.
Just got home.
We only been here 2 weeks.
Just got home. Jesus needs to come on back.
I was like, Lord.
And then last question. Last question.
Okay.
Because you are one of the most popular realtors in Southeast Topeka. So I would like for you to have every client in Southeast Topeka. That's just how I feel about you.
I would like to have every client in Southeast.
But you don't have that kind of time.
Yeah.
What are the things that your favorite clients do that make you want to go above and beyond for them?
Okay. I would say this. I actually go above and beyond, even for the clients I don't like, because I'm actually really competitive with myself.
Okay.
So when someone doubts me, I'm like, oh, no, you're going to get great service from me.
Yeah.
But I'm working on that. I'm just very competitive. But I would say the things that I really appreciate with my favorite clients is when they're like, it's okay, I trust you.
Yeah.
Like knowing that you have seen just the way that I carry myself and the way that I do my business, that you trust my opinion when I advise you, is the biggest thank you I could ever get. And not that I'm okay with like questions and wanting more information. I'm not saying take my word as like challenge me, right?
Yeah.
But don't demean what I have to say or make me feel like you think I'm incompetent.
Yeah.
And then, just having clients that are appreciative. I had a client send me flowers and I was like, oh, that was so nice of them to just show that extra mile that they are grateful. So just that gratitude and just them expressing that, no, we trust you. Like that's the biggest thank you ever. And I love working with those clients because they're happy. With the process, and it's a lot more peaceful for everybody.
Well, good stuff. I mean, I like those are things you need to remember. Those are things that are going to endear you to your realtor. I thank you for joining us on South by East.
Thank
I hope that you got some things that are going to help you. I know I'm steady learning every time I sit down with Del and hear her speak and just speak about the industry and her story. I'm constantly amazed. So we'll see you on the next episode of South by East.
Yeah.
Thank you for tuning into the South by East podcast, where we meet you at the intersection of culture and community. If you enjoy the content and want to help us keep the wheels turning, please rate and review us on your podcast app. For more information on resources shared, check the show notes, and we'll see you at the next intersection. We out.